You found us. We're here in our COVID closet. It's no longer COVID, but we're still in the closet. Our closet studio here in the middle of the great state of California. You found us, Emil Amok. Emil Guillermo, Emil Amok to you. Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. This is our micro talk show. For the AAPI and the AAXs, you know who you are. AAXs, that's all the rest of you who aren't included in the acronym, or who you don't think are included in the acronym. I say AAPI, that's sort of like the Obama years. It was AAPI. During the Biden years, we are now AANHPI. We're AANHIPIs. AANHIPIs. That's what we are. And I'll get into that. This is May. May is AANHIPI Heritage Month. So if you're an AANHIPI, it's a much broader term than you ever thought. Much broader. I'll get into that today because I'm expanding the definition. I'm going to help out our Arab brothers and sisters. I'm going to expand the definition. I'm going to tell you why. Okay? Because it's more than just, you go to people now and you say, oh, you're Asian. I thought Asian is Chinese. No. It's more than just Chinese. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Biden. Biden talked today. If you didn't see his statement, I'm going to annotate his statement, let you hear what he said, and then talk about what he said. And then we'll talk about the current state of the student protest. Because of what Columbia did, it's gotten worse. I predicted that on Tuesday. I said, if Columbia doesn't stay calm and start talking to the protesters, but the protesters are also at fault because they gave Columbia cover, because Columbia now can come back and say, well, they smashed windows. We don't like that. Oh, yeah, I don't like 34,000 people killed, in Gaza. But granted, if you have a problem with the smashed window, yes. But the protesters enabled that. They let in the excuse. Oh, well, they're defacing property. They're occupying buildings. The least they could have done maybe is charge the students rent. And this whole thing about outside agitation. Well, the outside agitation is an important thing because, if it's just students, if it's just like daycare, and if you got, instead of like nursery school type people doing this protest, instead you bring in professionals to tell your toddlers how to disrupt your family life, then you get upset. So I kind of get that, right, from a parental point of view. But really, it's no different than a student who is bad in algebra or higher math or chemistry seeking a tutor. They had tutelage. They had someone telling them how to be effective in doing what they wanted to do. So I don't begrudge them that. I think that actually shows they're sincere. But one thing about outside agitation is that if outside agitators were really hell-bent on disruption, once they got in, they would have gone in and gone all the way. But they didn't. That wasn't their role. Their role was to be, to these kids, professors, tutors, lecturers. They taught, they showed the kids how to do what they wanted to do. They consulted with someone who knew, because it was apparently a lot better than consulting with academics or administrators, because the academics were largely on the side of the students. Many of the professors were out there saying, this is a teaching lesson for the kids. Give it to them. Let them have it. It was the administrators who were hell-bent on having the graduation that got in the way. So, the outside agitation thing sounds worse than it is, but it really was up to Columbia to say, we're Columbia, we're the administrators here at Columbia, and we're in control. And as long as we're talking to the protesters, we're in control, and we are going to make this work peacefully. As soon as they called in the cops, it was over. And as soon as the protesters didn't know what to do after occupying the building, after they occupied the building, there was no more discussion. It was like, that was the discussion. They're occupying the building. That was all the administration needed to say, okay, we see your response, we're calling the cops. That was kind of tactically a bad move. I've always said both sides should just be calm, be peaceful. As long as they're peaceful, they would still be out there protesting. And as long as they saw it as civil disobedience, because I don't get the sense that even the protesters, even though they were nonviolent and they were non-resistant in their arrests, if they truly were demonstrably civil disobedient, I mean, it shows a certain respect, right? I mean, like if you're just limp and just don't do anything and you force the police to take you and hold you, I mean, that there's a whole thing about civil disobedience that in the video that I saw taken by the protesters, well, the cops came in and started swinging their things and got pretty violent in some of the clips I saw. In many of the clips that the news people had, it was not. I mean, it seemed like, oh, cops are innocent. Well, we don't know. We didn't see that video. But I just think that now we're in this stage where people just see what Columbia did. If you're anywhere in the country and you're head of a university, you say, okay, Columbia's setting the tone, call the cops, let's get these kids out. And that's the shame. Columbia could have taken the higher ground and showed not just the other colleges, but they could have shown the world how it's done in a free, democratic society where protest is allowed. You don't just hit the panic button, call in the autocrats. You have some discussion. Apparently, Columbia didn't have the time for that. They have a graduation to do. But like I said, the shameless action on Tuesday, I don't know if I'd want to go to that graduation. After what Columbia did, Columbia failed its democracy test. So, of course, we saw the ripple effect. UCLA, after having violence on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, they went in and cracked down late into the evening on Wednesday, and students were arrested. I'm going to read something from the LA Times, an interesting article. Look, it's not just Jews who fear anti-Semitism who are fearful. Muslims are also fearful. Arabs and Muslims are also fearful on campus. So, cuts both ways. And the only way to deal with it, to make some progress, is if both sides, if you're calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, you should be calling for a ceasefire on campus. You should be calling for peace on campus and the ability for all sides to talk. Administrators, students, outside agitators even. And this whole thing about outside agitation. Look, if you're a private university, you might have a claim. Yeah, outside agitators, we don't need you there. In a public institution, it's a little different. UCLA, City College, any public institution, everyone has a right to be there. The public has a right to be there. And the public has a right to express themselves in ways that may be considered abhorrent to some. but free speech is protected right up to the point of incitement. So, like I said, trickier for public institutions. Private institutions like Columbia, they could do what they did. What they did. But I think they could have taken the higher road and set the example for everyone. They didn't. Shame on Columbia. Shame on Columbia. All right, so I get that out of the way because that's sort of in the news. I don't want to talk about Trump and his trial, although the salacious points are coming out about how this deal was, how it came down. And I don't know. Now that the attorney who formerly represented Stormy Daniels is saying how he was dealing with Michael Cohen, who is Trump's attorney, about setting up this payment scheme. The prosecutor is being very smart about laying it out so that when Michael Cohen gets up there, how are you going to deny that any of this happened? All the testimony prior to Michael Cohen says, hey, this is how it happened. I think it's a smart way that the prosecutors are doing this. But once again, they're going to have to link all the sleaziness of the Stormy Daniels payments. It's not just a misdemeanor business records falsification matter. It's linked to the campaign. And we saw that with David Pecker the previous days. David Pecker, then publisher, National Enquirer, said as much, that, hey, they were like an arm of the campaign, of the Trump campaign. And that really, the attorney for Stormy Daniels was saying to Cohen, hey, look, if Trump loses, we've lost all leverage. We are effed. And when he said that, that made me realize how Trump can still win this election. Because Trump only wins, his motivation is self-interest. But when he can convince that the public self-interest is tied with his self-interest, and if he gets a majority, then he wins. And when you hear the attorney for Stormy Daniels, a former attorney, say to Michael Cohen, or repeating his conversation, saying, hey, if Trump loses, we're effed. We lose all leverage. And so they saw their futures intertwined with Trump's, his self-interest, their self-interest, a majority of those people thinking that way, and Trump wins. That could still happen. You already see some Republicans, right? I mean, some Republicans are seeing light, saying we don't want a convicted criminal. We don't want someone indicted running for president. But you need more Republicans saying that, rather than the Republicans saying, oh, he's a crook, but he's our crook. He's a crook, but his self-interest is my self-interest. I want him. I mean, that's when people who are Republicans, who are deranged and, still love Trump no matter what, that's what's happening. And that's why the ethical and moral divide exists. Because people are trapped and they feel that somehow the self-interest of Trump is also theirs. And when they do that, he just keeps logging votes, logging support, logging donations. That's how Trump can win. And I think he's convinced whites who are fearful of being displaced. He's convinced whites in the South. And now the question is, can he convince African Americans? Can he convince Latino Americans, mostly male, because there is a gender gap between men and women in those groups? Can he convince male Latinos, male African Americans that their interests and his interests are aligned? Because if he does, it could be game over. And that's what's happening in Michigan, right? When you have people who were once solidly pro-Biden, African Americans, Latinos, Arab Americans, where now they're crossing they're seeing what's going on, not just in the economy, but with Gaza, with Israel, with everything. And they're scratching their head saying, Biden's our guy. So this is the complex web of issues we're dealing with today. And every day it's something new. Every day we have to consider these new aspects coming up. And we're still far away from November and the election. A lot can happen. A lot can happen in 9 months. So we sit back, we observe, and we watch. This is May the 2nd. And I talked about, before I go on, so I don't think I have my swisher. My swisher wasn't working. The transition swish. There it is. Yeah. So I want to talk about, just for a second, Orlando. Orlando, Emil? Why do you want to? Orlando who? No, not Orlando who. Orlando what? If you go to amok.com, amok.com, that's my website. This is the Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander special, the Heritage Month special. Emil Amok, Lost NPR host, wily Filipino, vegan trans dad, is at the Orlando Fringe Festival, the Scarlet venue. They said, we name all our venues bluish. And blue is one of my favorite colors, if not the favorite. But now they said, we had to go red. So they're naming this venue Scarlet. It's in the Shakespearean building there in the theater center. The Scarlet venue they're in that central part of Orlando. May 16th, 18th, 19th, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Got 7 performances, all different times. The ticket link is at amok.com. Go there, and you'll see it on the sidebar. It says get tickets here. You'll see it all throughout. Let's see. Can I think I can even share my screen. Of course you can share your screen, Emil. And there it is, right? And yeah, there it is. It's on amok.com. I call it the Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Heritage Month special. It's Emil Amok. So you got all sorts of, you got a place to hit. That's donate, but you get your tickets here, or you scroll up and you get your tickets down here. All these great places to get tickets. You see the poster, and you see, there's Emil Amok, Lost NPR host, wily Filipino, vegan trans dad, written and performed by me. Look at what these critics have said. DC Metro Theater Arts said charismatic, not the horse, but Manhattan Digest said comical and often profound observations. They said it, not me. Orlando Weekly said, enjoy trying to keep pace with Guillermo's brilliant mind. Funny, poignant. Oh, yeah. You experience that now. So, and they're the laurels. Those are laurels there. American Book winner. But why would I want to see on stage if you're an American Book Award winner? Well, they're my words. Oh, okay. Asian American Journalist Award winner. Yeah. So this is a theater project. Well, it's won a Social Justice and Civil Rights Award. Talking about social justice and civil rights. So maybe that's happening here in Emil Amok, Lost NPR. Yeah. And then I won the Jill Marich Spirit of the Fringe Award winner for bringing a great show and being a good guy, basically, at the New York City Fringe recently. So, I won those awards. Yeah. Emil Amok, Los NPR host. I talk about my NPR experience, and not in the way that you think, but then in a revealing way. You want to see how, what NPR is really like. Wiley Filipino, is that me or is that my dad? And vegan trans dad. Oh, fathers, 3 generations here? Oh, Emil. All this in an hour. Yes, all this in an hour. Thursday, May 16th, 7:45 p.m. I like to put in AM or PM because, surely you're not performing in the morning. Well, that 7:45 at night. Saturday, the 18th at 6:30 at night, not in the morning. Sunday, May 19th, 12:15, around lunchtime. Wednesday, May 22nd, 7:50 at night. Thursday, May 23rd, 6:05 at night. Friday, May 24th, 10:15 at night. Oh, I wish that were morning. And then the final show, Saturday, May 25th, 6:20 p.m. The Orlando Fringe Theater Festival. It's the biggest. When I went there in 2017, it was the biggest theater festival in North America. And so there you have it. There's the show. Emil Amok, Los NPR host, Wiley Filipino, vegan trans dad. Go there, amok.com. amok.com, yeah. Go to amok.com and get your link. And if you're in Orlando, I'm not saying hit up your banker and go to Orlando, but if you're on the East Coast, it'd be great to see you in Orlando. I'm going to try to bring the show to California and to other places, but I think this is going to be it. I mean, I'm going to do May. I might come back and do something in September, October. But I've already done the New York City Fringe, and I didn't really plan on any other Fringe except some one-offs. So you can always just contact me and say, Emil, come to our town. Come to Chico. Come to Sacramento. Come to Honolulu. Go to Honolulu in a second. Come to LA, San Diego. But if you're in Florida, near Orlando, check it out, the Orlando Fringe. All right. Emil Amok, Los NPR, our host, Wiley Filipino, vegan trans dad. All right, so I want to talk to you about Joe Biden, because Joe Biden responded today with an important talk. I mean, he came in, cut in during the waking hours where he can make sense. I think he does make sense. Here was Joe Biden today. He was talking about what's going on in our college campuses. He says we've seen the images, and they put to the test 2 fundamental American principles: the right to free speech and the right for people to assemble peacefully, to peacefully assemble and make their voices heard. All right, that's the first, the right to free speech and to assemble. The second is the rule of law. Here is President Biden.
Both must be upheld. We are not an authoritarian nation where we silence people or squash dissent. The American people are heard.
That's an important point. I'm going to butt in here. We are not an authoritarian nation. I know a lot of people, you remember, during the Black Lives Matter protests in Washington, there was Trump bringing in the troops. He was with Attorney General Bill Barr, walking around there, and he held up a Bible too that day. This guy he's got his tropes that he brings out, but he was heavy-handed. He brought out the troops. We saw that during that march. We saw Asian Americans tear gassed, and that would be the approach of Trump now. even though he tries to make it sound like, oh, this is Biden's fault, making it sound like he would do better. No, Trump would not have done better. But Biden, he came out today and said, we are not an authoritarian nation where we silence people or squash dissent. American people are heard. An important point.
In fact, peaceful protest is in the best tradition of how Americans respond to consequential issues. But neither are we a lawless country. We're a civil society, and order must prevail.
This is the balance that everyone is seeking. And I think it gets lost in, as we get distracted by, violence, we get distracted by everything. We get distracted by the fact that what's going on keeps us from getting to the goal, which is both sides, all sides, have to get to the table and talk. That's, if you're serious, if you're earnest about divestment, if you're earnest about peace, if you're earnest about getting along, then you got to sit down and talk. And I don't think Colombia was interested in anything but their graduation. And once they did what they did and called the cops, then everyone else did. And that's unfortunate. But Biden's right. We're a civil society. Order must prevail. And you can protest, but ultimately, if you want what you say you want, the main strategy is to get to the table and talk.
Throughout our history, we've often faced moments like this because we are a big, diverse, free-thinking, and freedom-loving nation. In moments like this, there are always those who rush in to score political points.
Who's scoring political points? That former president who played golf when he had a day off from his trial, scoring political points, even though he's on trial.
But this isn't a moment for politics. It's a moment for clarity. So let me be clear. Peaceful protest in America. Violent protest is not protected. Peaceful protest is. It's against the law when violence occurs. Destroying property is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law. Vandalism, trespassing, breaking windows, shutting down campuses, forcing the cancellation of classes and graduations. None of this is a peaceful protest. Threatening people, intimidating people, instilling fear in people is not peaceful protest.
All right, so Biden's laying the rules for a civil society. We honor protests, but it's got to be peaceful. That should have been the guiding principle. And from the reports I saw, not many of the protesters are speaking. Not speaking directly to the press. They're covering their faces, covering, everything. They want to remain anonymous. That's got to change. They've got people who aren't, I don't know if they're even students who are representing them in the media. So that when I wrote on the ALDEF blog about a protester at Princeton who was arrested, you know how innocent she was because, she's talking to the press, got arrested. Makes no bones about that. She wasn't covering her face. She wasn't trying to remain anonymous because she is concerned about what's happening to the Gazans. She is concerned about university monies being spent on, the war machine. She's concerned about all that. It's out of innocence. It's out of sincerity. That's student protest. When it gets into the professional level, then you got to wonder. Doesn't mean that you shut down their protest. It just means it's a different kind of negotiation. So here's more Biden. He's talking about how it's against the law to have these violent protests.
Dissent is essential to democracy. But dissent must never lead to disorder or to denying the rights of others so students can finish the semester and their college education. Look, it's basically a matter of fairness. It's a matter of what's right. There's the right to protest, but not the right to cause chaos.
The right to protest, but not the right to cause chaos. That's important. If your goal is to create chaos, that's one thing. If you have a higher goal, like divestment, like peace, like anti-war, I mean, a lot of the problems here is that people aren't taking the anti-war demand seriously of the students. They should. They really should.
People have the right to get an education, the right to get a degree, the right to walk across the campus safely without fear of being attacked. But let's be clear about this as well. There should be no place on any campus, no place in America for anti-Semitism or threats of violence against Jewish students.
An important point. Because the best defense of the people who are critical of the protesters is they say these protests are anti-Semitic. Well, the protests aren't anti-Semitic. The protests are anti-war. But are maybe some actions that some protesters engage in, are they anti-Semitic? Maybe some, but it cuts both ways. There are Muslim and Arab students who also feel threatened, who may not be a part of the main core of the protest, but they also feel threatened. I've heard that. I'll read you the article in the LA Times. They talked to a Muslim student in LA at UCLA who's feeling threatened. But the basic thing is there's a way to have civil protests, and using chaos is unacceptable.
There is no place for hate speech or violence of any kind, whether it's anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or discrimination against Arab Americans or Palestinian Americans. It's simply wrong. There's no
Simply wrong, he says. There's
place for racism in America. It's all wrong. It's un-American. I understand people have strong feelings and deep convictions. In America, we respect the right and protect the right for them to express that. But it doesn't mean anything goes.
It doesn't mean anything goes. It doesn't mean chaos. I mean, the president's sounding very sensible. I mean, it's conservative enough for the liberals and progressives who want to see an exchange of discourse, but they don't want to see an exchange of batons and sticks and rocks or any of that. They want peaceful demonstrations. They don't want to see the police engaged, because we all know what happens when the police get involved. Things get nasty. We don't want to see that.
It needs to be done without violence, without destruction, without hate, and within the law. Make no mistake.
So this is the wind up. Here's the big close. He doesn't mention inflection point, but he does sound hopeful. He says, make no mistake.
As president, I will always defend free speech, and I will always be just as strong in standing up for the rule of law. That's my responsibility to you, the American people, my obligation to the Constitution. Thank you very much.
Notice, it comes back to the Constitution. That's all he's got, right? It's not individuals. It's not, my bank account. It's not Democrats. It's the Constitution. So that was pretty good on the part of Biden. Some people shouted out, are you going to change your policy? He said, no. He said, let's see, he said, I got to get my note here. He said, is there going to be a change of policy? He said, no. He said, is the National Guard being called out? Because if you can imagine this, some conservatives are saying, Speaker Mike Johnson, who the Democrats have allied with for the defense bills. Now, Johnson was saying, hey, National Guard time, not National Guard time. It is not National Guard time. So I don't know what's going to happen, but Biden has spoken, and he's letting the local officials, the administrators on each campus, do their thing, but he's telling both sides here the way it should be done. I just hope that we get out of these next few weeks without anything major. It's graduation time. Students should graduate, but if it happens so the graduations can't happen, I mean, USC has shut down its main graduation, but maybe that's what it takes. I mean, this is serious. This, I think, this was the problem with Columbia. They didn't take it seriously. They just said, oh, we'll just call in the police, get rid of them. If they took it seriously, they'd say, oh, we believe in these students and we want to respect these students and listen to them. And if it takes a while, if they're serious, we'll be serious. And look, it might take a while before we get to something that's doable. But that's what I call good faith discussions. And Columbia wouldn't have them. They called the cops. All right. We'll follow. We'll see if there's more. But you basically got how I feel about this whole thing. I mean, I don't feel good about it. NYU is having protests today. It's a little smaller this morning, but NYU, another private institution. So we'll see what goes in NYU. NYU, the thing about NYU is unlike Columbia, the campus is the city. I mean, there are some places at NYU where you can go and it feels campus-like, but pretty much you're in the city. And I'd hate for something. I mean, then you know, there's no, even though it's a private institution, it's so intermingled with the city that you try to make a decision or distinction between outside agitation and students, even if you can. I don't buy it. I don't buy the universities, all the universities trying to make a distinction. Oh, these are outside agitators. Yeah, but they were tutoring your students because your professors weren't giving your students the education they wanted. They wanted to know about the real world. They wanted to know about affecting the real world. They weren't getting that by being in, you know, some STEM class or an English class or whatever class. Who knows what these kids are studying? They seem to come all across the board. But there was something more important than studies at Columbia, so that people were out there encamped. All right. I did mention at the top, this is Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And I just wanted to get into this idea of who the Asian Americans are. Because I don't think people know enough about Asian Americans and where they are, who they are, and, you know, what they, you know, where they live. Most Asian Americans, there's 4.2 million Asian Americans in the Northeast. That's only 19%. The Northeast, New York, Massachusetts, right? Connecticut, New Jersey, only 19%, 4.2 million. It's far more in the South. Southern Asians, including Texas and Florida, 5.3 million. That's 24% of the Asian American population. This is circa 2019, the numbers from the Pew Foundation, using census data, which will be somewhat outdated, but I think those numbers still hold. The Midwest, use Chicago, Asian Americans, 2.7 million. So half of the Northeast and the South, right? 2.7 million on 12%. So if you want to go someplace and really stick out as an Asian American, go to the Midwest. I have to say, these are 2019 numbers. I was in the Midwest at Washington U in St. Louis in the late 70s, where people looked at me and said, "Are you Hispanic?" I mean, they had no idea. They said, "Oh, what country are you from?" And I had to say, "America." I mean, everyone's getting that now. Younger Asian Americans get that all the time. But imagine how Asian Americans were in the 70s and the 80s. I mean, we're talking 50 years ago, right? A lot of young Asian Americans think, "Oh, we got it made. The world is our oyster." They forget. They forget the shoulders they stand on. Yeah, it wasn't easy in the Midwest. Only 2.7 million Asian Americans now, 12%. And a lot of them in the Midwest, I think they also include in this map that I have here, Pew, I think they also include Minnesota, right? The Hmong, big Hmong population. And oddly enough, in the Midwest and the Plains states, a lot of Filipinos are the number one Asian group in North and South Dakota. Hard to believe. I have a hard time believing that. All right, so where are the most Asian? Of course, Los Angeles, right? San Francisco, Los Angeles. 9.8 million in the West. And by the West, we mean from New Mexico, Arizona, Idaho, Montana, Washington, Oregon, California. And then we also include Hawaii and Alaska. 9.8 million, 45% of the Asian American community. So that just gives you a sense, about the Asian American community. I mean, if you're going to go around saying, "Hey, I'm an Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander," I'll let people know about the depth of the community. Here's the thing: 6 in 10 Asian Americans, including 71% of Asian American adults, were born in another country. By comparison, 14% of all Americans, only 14% of all Americans, and 17% of adults were born elsewhere. And why is this? Because a quarter of all immigrants, Asia accounted for a quarter of all immigrants who came to the U.S. since 1965. That was the impact of the 1965 law. There was zero. The quota was zero for Asian immigration to come in from 1924 to 1965. And then the Hart-Celler Act in 65 said, "Open the gates." Now we have an Asian American community. Before, we had a whole lot of white people, some blacks, some Latinos, and a handful of Asians. You open the door in 65, and man, here's this mad rush. So that's how it happened. That's how we got Asian America. That was the Big Bang. The Big Bang was in 1965. This is a report from Pew. They say immigrants account for only 27% of Japanese Americans who began arriving in the 19th century as plantation workers in what is now the state of Hawaii. So not as many Japanese immigrants. You got third and fourth generation Japanese Americans now. By contrast, many Bhutanese arrived recently as refugees, and 85% are foreign born. So we are both, we're our own contradiction. Asian America is all self-contradictory. Here for generations, here for just a short time. Non-immigrant, mostly immigrant. And get this, Asian Americans are projected to be the nation's largest immigrant group by the middle of the century. Surpassing Hispanics by 2055. Asians are expected to make up 36% of all immigrants, while Hispanics will make up 34%. So that's a big deal. I mean, right now, Hispanics are more numerous than blacks, right? And Asians, but 2055, that's not very far. 2024 now, soon 2030. So, we're talking about another generation. We're talking about Asian Americans surpassing Hispanics. People from Asia made up 14% of the 10.5 million unauthorized immigrants in the U.S. in 2017. 4 nations in Asia among the top 15 countries of birth for U.S. unauthorized immigrants. Unauthorized immigrants. India, 525,000. China, the Philippines, and Korea. So, unauthorized, 10.5 million unauthorized here in the U.S. from India, China, the Philippines, and Korea. The U.S.-born Asians are all younger than the rest of the Asian American population. The median age for Asians in the U.S. is 34. That means half older, half younger. The median age of U.S.-born Asians was 19, compared with age 36 among all U.S.-born people. So we're young Asians. Foreign-born Asians, meanwhile, have the same median age as the nation's overall immigrant population. So it's a youth movement. Youth of the U.S.-born Asian population is reflected in their generational breakdown. Nearly 6 in 10 U.S.-born Asians are members of Generation Z in 2019, which means they were 22 or younger at the time. So 60% of U.S.-born Asians, Gen Z. Oh my God. I got to be nice to my Gen Z daughter. Another quarter of U.S.-born Asian population that year belonged to the millennials. So 1 in 10 or fewer. So a quarter, 25% were millennials. 26% were millennials. Gen X's, 22%. So, there's some, millennials, Gen Z close, or Gen X rather. Gen Z, 31%. And the boomers, we're a dying breed. 17, we're at 17, we're outnumbered. The boomers. U.S. born boomer, 10%. That's kind of crazy. The U.S. born. That means we are a minority. If you were born in the U.S. and you're a boomer like me, we are a minority of the minority. Just 10%. And then who in the boomer group is foreign born Asian? 25%. So it's like people who are born in America who are American, native born Americans, boomer age, 10%. And then you get the silent generation, which is the older than 75, 6% U.S. born, 7% foreign born. And that's more in line. But there's the disparities. When I see people my age, I'm born in America, a boomer Asian American, 25% are foreign born. I mean, yeah, we feel a kinship because we're Asian, but we also feel that isolation because we're U.S. born versus foreign born. That issue isn't as it's more prominent with the other Asian age groups. For example, Gen Z, post-Gen Z, and millennials. 58% are foreign born, and about 37%, 58% are U.S. born, and 37% are foreign born. So now we get that, we're turning American. We're more American. Millennials and Gen X, sort of split generation, they're both about the same. You're going to get almost in equal numbers. More, actually more the same. 34 foreign born, 25 to 30 U.S. born. The big difference being those millennials, or being the Gen Zs. They're all born here, which makes us younger. That's the community. And because they're born here, what's that mean? That means 72% of all U.S. Asians were proficient in English, meaning they spoke only English or spoke the language well. And that means we got an Asian U.S. population. It's going to be the majority, not the majority, but it's going to be more, it's going to be the largest minority population. It's going to surpass Hispanics and surpass blacks by 2055. It's an Asian nation, Asian flavor, right? I mean, that's what, if you go out and celebrate Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month, that really is the message. The U.S. is Asian flavor, undeniable. Some other, despite doing well on economic indicators overall, income varies widely among Asian origin groups. And a lot has to do with when you came in. So foreign-born households earned slightly more than those headed by U.S.-born Asians. Let's see. On the whole, Asians do well on measures of economic well-being compared with the overall U.S. population, but it varies. In 2019, the median annual household income of households headed by Asians was $85,800, compared with $61,800 among all U.S. households. Foreign-born Asian households earn slightly more than those headed by U.S.-born Asians, $88,000 to $85,000. But based on where you came from and your circumstances, there's a lot of poverty. Households headed by Burmese, for example, had significantly lower incomes than Asian Americans overall, $44,000 to $85,000. By contrast, only two Asian groups had higher household incomes than among Asian Americans overall. Indian Americans, $110,000, and those headed by Filipino Americans, $90,000. All told, 12 Asian origin groups had higher median household incomes than median among all Americans. So Asians are less likely than Americans overall to live in poverty, but the poverty rate among immigrant Asian minors, those under the age of 18, was at about 16%. So depends on when you came, depends on where you came from. Mongolians, 25%, had the highest poverty rates among Asian groups. The lowest was Indians, 6%. Where you are in your journey, what you came with, has a lot to do with your income. And so these are interesting stats. I'm going to share a lot of these throughout Asian Pacific American, I'm saying it the old way, Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Heritage Month, because I think that we need to know these things. And so tomorrow I'll talk about the Arabs, right? And I'll talk about Teresa Watanabe's column. I don't think it was a column. I think Teresa Watanabe in the LA Times, because this whole situation is going to get, I think it's going to get worse, unfortunately. I was hoping it would get better. It would have gotten better if Colombia had held their fire and did nothing. But Colombia called the cops. Now everyone's calling the cops. Now there's arrests. Now there's trouble. And I think it's only emboldened some students. But I think what's important is that when we celebrate Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Heritage Month, we need to embrace everyone. We have Muslims and Arabs who are Asian American. And I'll explain that tomorrow. But, let me leave you with this. This is Teresa Watanabe's column or article. She writes about how she says the UCLA Muslim student wears sunglasses, a keffiyeh scarf, and face mask to avoid recognition on campus. She's asked to move her classes online to prevent others from knowing her route and following her. She will speak only on the condition of anonymity to protect herself and her future as an aspiring nurse. But her caution has not helped her feel safe. She is terrified by the hate that has rained down on her and her fellow pro-Palestinian supporters since Hamas militants attacked Israel on October 7th and Israel retaliated with a massive and continuing assault on Gaza. She's been spat on and called a terrorist multiple times, she said. Men who have come to the encampment have threatened rape. A woman brandished a stun gun at her on campus, laughing. But nothing was as chilling as Tuesday night when a mob of counter-protesters began to attack the Palestinian Solidarity encampment erected by students last week, tearing down barriers, assaulting campers, and screaming epithets as captured in videos by the Times. I never felt more scared in my life, she said. I felt my life was in danger. And this is what I saw on video on Tuesday night or Tuesday morning when there was no police presence at UCLA. It was late Tuesday night after the crackdown at Columbia. Later on that night on the West Coast, there were the UCLA administration declared the encampments illegal, and then there was no police presence, and it was essentially the pro-Israeli folks against the pro-Palestinian folks, and there was violence. They took it upon themselves, which shouldn't happen, and everyone still to this day was wondering, oh, where were the cops? Oh, they returned today and made some arrests, but this is one of the problems. It cuts both ways. The Arab, the Israeli, the pro forces, they need to learn to get along, come together and talk with the administration. And that seems to be the only way that we're going to get to some kind of path toward a peaceful solution to this. I know there were some people who say, oh, look, just wait for summer to come and the clock will run out. But no, this is an ongoing thing. This is an ongoing, it's not going away. Unless the people who can do something about whether Netanyahu does X, Y, or Z, some people think that's only Netanyahu. Other people think the U.S. has a heck of a lot it can do to influence what goes on. That might be overstated, but that's a feeling by some people. We enable them. They should listen to us. And it may come down to tough talk among leaders in that realm, and that trickles down to the people involved in the protests on campus. All right, a swish out, please. All right, we're going to be back in tomorrow. Check out my column on the ALDEF blog, aaldef.org/blog. I talk about Arab Americans and the history of Arab Americans and how they really want to be known as Middle Eastern North African peoples, but there's no census designation for them, and the Commerce Department hasn't figured out how to make that happen. So until that happens, they're Asian American. Again, even though they're sort of white. I'll explain that tomorrow. So be listening. Also, we'll bring in, hopefully Dan Gonzalez will join us again. Hey, before I leave, just want to mention again, to go to amok.com if you happen to be in Orlando later in May for Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. I'm going down to Orlando in May. I'll be there May 15th. My show starts May 16th. Check it out. I think there's one show that's cheap, and the rest are, they're all cheap. But one show is real cheap, so you should come and see it. And then you can see it again and pay full price. And full price is like what? Less than $20. Come on. It's at Orlando's Fringe Festival, the Scarlet venue. Check it out. Go to amok.com, get tickets if you happen to be in Orlando. I'll be there. And I hope to see you there too. All right. We like to end our shows with a little loving kindness. All right. Loving kindness makes the world go around. It does. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time. Mahal